How the COVID-19 pandemic affected live service games. Research. The COVID-19 pandemic was a disaster for the world. Millions died and millions more were in hospitals suffering all around the globe. Many companies and industries suffered due to the restrictions put in place to try and protect the population. One of the many that were affected during this time was the games industry. But due to the fact most games are online and the production of the games can also be done semi-remotely, they weren't the worst off. But the fact the pandemic and lockdown was so sudden, many companies were at a loss of what to do for the better of their future. Once again, the fact that video games can be downloaded and played online from home was incredibly helpful for those stuck at home, which meant gaming was one of the most used sources to pass the time. 62% of UK adults and 55% of Americans turned to games to help them through the pandemic and being stuck inside. 27% played games just to be able to stay in touch with people they can't meet in person. Many games, which are full package games, which means once you buy it you have the entire thing, could halt development until better ways of games design and production could be adjusted for this unprecedented time. However, games that are live service had to continue development to keep up with the updates scheduled for release further down the line. Case Study 1. My first case study is Dead by Daylight, also known as DBD. It is an asymmetric 4 vs 1 game created by Behaviour Interactive, where one player is the killer and the other 4 are survivors trying to escape the map without being sacrificed. When Dead by Daylight was released, it sold just under 500,000 units of the game and earned approximately $7 million in its first month alone. Dead by Daylight is a live service game. Live service games are games that rely on constant updates to keep their game relevant and to add in new mechanics, characters, maps, cosmetics and more. These games typically have a roadmap that they have planned to adhere to. Unlike regular games, there is no pausing to find an appropriate method of continuing development during this unprecedented time. To keep up with their yearly roadmap, the developers need to stay on task. Something like COVID would set them back, especially when COVID was prime time for people playing games, which would have expanded their audience significantly. Around the time lockdowns and restrictions started to be put in place all around the world, the Dead by Daylight player count went up by 30% and kept increasing, where until it finally went down in August, but even then it was only a small change. It was a less than 1% loss. The first time Dead by Daylight acknowledged the pandemic was when they held an event called the Quarantine Blood Rush. This event started on March 25th, 2020 and lasted up until April 15th, 2020. Even though the event was simple, it would have been created, planned and released during the time of quarantine, so it showed that Behaviour Interactive were able to keep the game running and players interested. Case Study 2. My second case study is on the app Pokemon Go, an AR game, augmented reality, created by Niantic, where you get to catch Pokemon, protect your team's gyms, battle other trainers, and complete special tasks, all while exploring the real world. When it was released, Pokemon Go was hailed a global phenomenon, becoming the most downloaded game worldwide on multiple app stores. It was downloaded more than 500 million times worldwide by the end of 2016, which was the year it was released. Pokemon Go wasn't as popular in 2020 as it was when it originally released in 2016. However, it managed to make just about $1 billion, which was approximately 11% higher than what was made in 2016. However, because the game came out halfway through that year, the game's income isn't an exact month-to-month ratio. This may seem weird because it would have been almost impossible to safely play Pokemon Go, as you have to go outside and walk around for the app to properly work. But since Niantic wanted their players to be safe, they had to change the app to work where the player was mostly stationary. They released a promotion called the Play Where You Are initiative, which had special sales and codes so people wouldn't have to travel to Pokestops to gather items like Pokeballs and healing items so they could actually play the game. Many game features were also changed so they would be able to be played remotely in homes rather than travelling in person. Another thing changed to comply with new COVID regulations was the yearly event that had players come together from all around the globe. It was changed to be an in-game event to try and stop people travelling for it. Because the event was online and didn't require people to spend money on travel, over 600,000 trainers bought tickets and joined the festival. This was 10 times the amount of people that took place the year before in 2019, and around 30 times the amount from the years 2017 and 2018. Discussion. The main discussion will be the differences between the games, which of the games ultimately had the better time during COVID, and how the games went on after the restrictions were lifted, such as, did they immediately lose all their players? Were edits made during the COVID era revoked? And did the events that happened during COVID change the games for the better? I'm going to be comparing, analysing and evaluating the two case studies against each other, while also stating the differences, as many aspects of the games won't be similar enough to completely pit them against each other. Key points. The key points in my essay are going to be player count, the rise and fall throughout the year, how COVID affected it, and was there any other time that it got as high or low? Income. How did the pandemic affect in-game spending? How much money did they get in the year 2020? And which other years were similar and why? Adapt and overcome. The updates made to make sure players stayed safe and interested. This will include updates made early on in COVID procedures, and what was made further down the line to better the game due to the limitations of COVID. This will also include what the companies did to keep their updates on schedule, the result that it had when it was launched, and the opinions of players when it was released. The pros and cons. The pros and cons of said decisions that had to be made due to COVID, and how people reacted to those changes throughout. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic made games struggle, whether it was how they would keep updating their games to stay on schedule with their roadmap planning, or the fact that their game wasn't suitable to be played like intended during a national lockdown. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a good side to it too. Both games garnered many new players and got back some old ones as well. It also made game development companies come up with new ways to adapt game development that would help them out in the future and allow them to expand their companies with things such as remote working.